Delighted to have you all here. I'm sorry about the initial confusion. Oh, there's a transcript. Okay. So Lorenza Gianfrancesco is a senior lecturer here in early modern European history at the University of Chichester. She's also a consultant director at the Chichester Centre for Fairy Tales, Fantasy and Speculative Fiction. Her expertise is on early modern Southern European fairy tale studies with a focus on Giambattista Basile. Lorenza is particularly interested in the history of fairy tales and tales of magic within a European context. Lorenza, please tell us about Basile.
Thank you very much, Heather. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the University of Chichester. We are delighted to host this conference on Giambattista Basile, the maestro of the Neapolitan Baroque and a prominent figure in early modern European culture. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge some things. Firstly, of course, to the Chichester Centre for Fairy Tales, Fantasy and Speculative Fiction at our university. A special thanks goes to Dr. Paul Quinn and Dr. Naomi Foyle for having warmly supported the organisation of this event. I would also like to thank our senior management and our head of school, Professor Hugo Frey, for their invaluable support. A special thanks goes to Miss Heather Robbins, who has worked tremendously hard in ensuring the flawless organisation of this event. So thank you, Heather. Finally, of course, my thanks extend to our speakers, to you, our speakers, and our audience. I am very excited by what the day holds in store for us. So without further ado, let us begin. So in my short introductory paper, I would like to say just a few words about Basile's life and work, as well as the vibrant scholarly milieu of early 17th century Naples. So, who was Giambattista Basile? A soldier, courtier, academician, linguist, and acclaimed author. Giambattista Basile was born in Naples on the 4th of February, 1583. His family included talented people, notably his brother, Donato Basile, who would put some villanelle written by Giambattista to music, and his sister, Adriana Basile, one of the most renowned singers of 17th century Italy. Adriana's influence would facilitate Giambattista's contacts and career in the service of powerful aristocrats. Basile's youth, however, was marked by hardship. Unable to establish himself within the precarious world of patronage, he left Naples for Venice. There, he joined the Republic fleet, travelled along the Adriatic coast, and this, I think, is an important point to consider when reconstructing Basile's Mediterranean encounters, and spent a period of time on the island of Crete, which at that time was under Venetian rule. In Crete, Giambattista established contacts with Venetian aristocrats and the Cornaro family, the Corner or Cornaro family, one of whose members, Andrea Cornaro, had founded an academy there at the very end of the 16th century, which was called the Stravaganti Academy. Basile became a member of this academy under the nickname Pigro, lazy, or the lazy one, a nickname that he preserved throughout his life when he joined other academies, as we shall see in a few minutes. So as a member of this circle, he wrote a series of encomiastic compositions, first at Crete and then upon his return to the Italian peninsula. This was an important formative experience, which on the one hand introduced Giambattista to the world of academies and non-Neapolitan aristocrats' patrons, while on the other, it enhanced cultural encounters within a major Mediterranean multicultural, commercial and intellectual hub that he would fondly remember in his work, including The Tale of Tales. Around 1608, Basile returned to Naples, where his sister Adriana had acquired considerable fame as a singer at the court of Luigi Carafa, Prince of Stigliano. To honor Adriana, Basile dedicated one of his earliest works, a collection of poetry entitled Madriali et Ode, Madrigals and Odes, to her. In 1611, while Basile was still in Naples, an important aristocrat, Marquis Giambattista Manzo, founded the Oziosi Academy. Basile was among its founding members, together with other scholars and close collaborators of Basile, such as Giambattista della Porta, as well as powerful figures, such as the Spanish Viceroy of Naples, Fernando de Castro, 7th Council Lemus, under whose auspices the Academy was funded. And here, very, very briefly, I would like to present the city of Naples in this period. So Naples, at the time, during the first half of the 17th century, was the most densely populated city in Europe, with 500 up to 500 inhabitants, which included commuters who would enter the city on a daily basis. Naples was also a major port in the Mediterranean, a cultural hub, and the capital of a kingdom under Spanish rule that extended from southern Latium, so from the border of the Papal States, to Sicily. So as a Spanish territory, the largest in the Mediterranean, Spanish viceroys were appointed to reside in the city and govern it. And they all resided in one of the most beautiful and important courts in the Mediterranean, the Viceregal Court of Naples. So, going back to Giambattista, around 1613, after having joined the academy, Giambattista had to leave Naples again, this time for Mantua, where Adriana and her family had established themselves at the lavish court of Duke Vincenzo Gonzaga. The Duke's patronage offered Basile an opportunity to establish himself as a courtier and literato. Upon his return to Naples in 1617, Basile joined other academies, quite a few, worked for different patrons, and cemented his position within the city's Spanish court. Here, Basile would be in the service of 4 viceroys, an exceptional career given the complicated and, I should say, complex world, and precarious as well, of Spanish patronage. And this exceptional career ended only with his death in 1632. The Neapolitan court was a sophisticated cultural center and a multilingual hub for literati. Many Spanish scholars resided in the city as part of the viceroy's entourage. Francisco de Quevedo, whom Basile met, is a notorious example. He was a secretary of the Duke of Osuna, who was viceroy of Naples between 1616 and 1620. The court was also a venue where spectacles were routinely staged. Basile operated within this environment and often produced or directed theatrical performances, which were recited, sung, or even danced. This was the case of masquerades, for example. And this was congenial to Basile's talents as a writer, but also as a renowned performer and improviser. He became so famous as a narrator of short stories that in remembering his performances, a friend and fellow academician wrote, and here I quote, "So quick was Giambattista both in prose and poetry that I very often marveled to see how in the space of a few hours he would come up with a large and good mixture of things." End quote. Performed in courts, and I argue in academies, Basile's improvised recitations were often delivered in Neapolitan. The latter is an important detail that links his literary production in vernacular to a contemporary debate that challenged the centrality of Tuscan as a literary language. In early 17th century Naples, this was deeply felt. Ideas concerning local identity, popular culture, the representation of Naples' urban sphere and its heritage, not to mention the city's multicultural social fabric, were distinguishing features of a scholarly debate that also promoted the use of local vernacular in written culture. Plays, eclogues, dialogues, short stories, and academic lectures were often written in Neapolitan. So in a milieu favoring linguistic experimentation and aiming to position local vernacular and the heritage it embraced within a written literary tradition, Neapolitan scholars also enriched their local dialect with a learned component. Historically, this marks the passage from a mainly orally transmitted urban dialect to what will become a Neapolitan literary language. In relation to a discourse that challenged the hegemony of the Tuscan language, Neapolitan also developed its own learned vocabulary of nouns, names, and expressions, often translated from Latin. So what we see here is a community of scholars working together to promote the city's dialect whilst employing it as a literary language. Blending popular and Hellenistic culture, literature in Neapolitan became a distinctive voice that best described the kaleidoscopic world of the city, its people, and its vibrant intellectual milieu. So from courts to inns, from nobles to prostitutes and charlatans, from street dialect to academic disputes, urban Naples also became a microcosm populated by Ovidian transformations, philosophical reflections of human nature, Galenic humors, astrological medicine, science, and ingenious and often comical alchemical transformations. Basile's position within this milieu was central. Indeed, he established close contacts with a group of scholars who shared the same goals and wrote in Neapolitan literary language. For instance, in his work entitled Journey to Parnassus, Giulio Cesare Cortese was a close friend of Basile, defended the right of local languages to be positioned within the literary canon. In relation to Neapolitan, he exclaimed, and here I quote, "What is Naples lacking not to be able to say that the Muses were born there?" End of quote. Similarly, Filippo Sgrutendio's famous work entitled Giambattista is a comical portrait of ugly, low-mannered female characters speaking in Neapolitan, which became to be known as Neapolitan anti-Petrarchan poetry. So, but the most famous and widely disseminated product of this scholarly milieu is Giambattista Basile's Lo Conto dei Conti, The Tale of Tales, which to an extent partly reworked the Boccaccian model with a Neapolitan twist, and we will hear more about this important aspect of Basile's work later on today. So published posthumously between 1634 and 1636, thanks to Adriana, who gave her brother's manuscript to a Neapolitan publisher. Lo Conto is the work, indeed, a masterpiece upon which Basile's fame rests. Written in Neapolitan, that Neapolitan, The Tale of Tales is a collection of 50 stories narrated by 10 women over a period of 5 days. The storytelling takes place at the court of Prince Taddeo, who summons the most skilled performers of short stories in the kingdom in order to entertain his pregnant wife. Indeed, as Prince Taddeo states in the opening tale, and here I quote, "The most pleasing thing in the world, my eminent ladies, is to listen to the doings of other people." End of quote. The Tale of Tales was therefore conceived as a performative text for courtly entertainment, and I argue, a text that was performed during scholarly gatherings that Basile attended in Naples. Time precludes discussion of aspects of Basile's stories that could not have been performed within a courtly environment due to their subversive contents. So one of the most fascinating features of Loconto is the blend of the popular and the erudite dimension. Through the use of a spurious language that mixes dialect and academic expressions, the characters in Basile's stories speak, swear, laugh, shout, and very often comically digress. In the Tale of Tales, it is natural for the uneducated to use popular proverbs and expressions whilst making nuanced or explicit allusions to Ovid, Petrarch, Aristotle, Boccaccio, and Galen, to name just some. Likewise, mythological references constitute a recurrent theme and are the narrative skeleton of many of Basile's tales. Thus, on the one hand, Loconto constitutes an ambitious project of linguistic and cultural experimentation, while on the other, it is a skillful manipulation of Baroque literary tropes. Here, I would like to focus my attention on two central elements in Basile's tales, namely the idea of transformation and the reference to some classical sources. Apollonius of Rhodes, Apuleius, Aristotle, Euripides, and Ovid's Metamorphoses, to name but some. Basile's rework of classical sources enabled him to narrate ingenious tales of physical, social, and cathartic transformations. The 50 stories share a common structure that revolves around this central theme, and each story contains a frame tale that provides a summary of the story itself, an introduction to the story and its themes, the setting, which is usually imaginary, and also each tale contains some themes that are variously and imaginatively addressed, like disorder, conflict, final transformation, and then ending. So cyclical and incessant transformation, spiritual, physical, as I said, wondrous or monstrous, and imitation of classical models were tropes in Baroque literature, which feature prominently in Basile's stories. Specifically, the author's use of Ovid's Metamorphoses elucidates this point. And here I will give a couple of examples to conclude. So, the sixth tale of the second day, entitled The She-Bear, narrates the story of the king of Dry Rock, who wants to take his daughter, called Preziosa, as his wife. To escape, and here we see, yes, the dissolution of moral and social conventions. To escape her father, Preziosa is helped by an old woman, the saving agent, who gives her a stick, magic object, and says, and here a quote from Basile: "When your father wants to behave like a stallion, though he has more in common with an ass, put this stick in your mouth, and you will immediately become a bear." End of quote. As a follower of Artemis, Callisto took a vow to remain a virgin, as did all the nymphs of Diana. But to help her, Zeus disguised himself, Ovid says, as Diana herself, in order to rape her. Callisto was then turned into a bear by Juno, wife of Zeus. And here I quote from Ovid's Metamorphoses, Book 2. "The goddess Juno was enraged and changed her into a beast. Thus she became a bear." End of quote. Likewise, the first tale of the third day entitled Cannetella, narrates the story of a female character called Cannetella, which literally means little reef, who is unable to find a husband to her liking. She falls into the hands of an ogre who gives her an awful life. She's finally rescued by a sewer cleaner who works in the service of her father as a vassal. So you see the dissolution also, and the comical reworking and the mocking, if you like, mockery of social hierarchies as well. So in the opening paragraph of this tale, Basile writes, quote, "There was once a king, the king of lovely Nope, who had a greater desire to breed than porters have the desire for funerals to be held so that they can gather the melted wax." And here there is a beautiful reference to professions and professionals in early modern Naples. So the people that Basile would observe or would have contact with on in the city while in the city. So going back to the tale, the king even made a vow to the goddess Syrinx. If she gave him a child, he would call her Cannetella, little reed, in memory of how the goddess had transformed into a reed. End quote. Here, the reference is to the myth of the nymph Syrinx, who transformed into a reed to escape the lustful god Pan. Again, Basile was inspired by the story of Syrinx contained in Ovid's Metamorphoses, again in Book 1, but the two texts are different. The tone of Basile's tale deconstructs this Ovidian myth, perhaps to enhance a comical effect or to skillfully mock established literary models. In this open, performative space, Basile gives voice to all: capricious kings, unhappy princesses, swearing gods and goddesses, fairies, magic objects, monstrous creatures, crafty charlatans, peasants, beggars, and slaves who move from imaginary places to the streets of Naples. And since the 17th century, Basile's tales of magic continue to embark on a journey of endless transformations. From Naples to Europe and beyond, tales such as The Cat Cinderella, who in the original version by Basile is the proud assassin of a stepmother, is continually translated, narrated, and reworked within a variety of contexts, like many of all Basile's stories. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Lorenza. Thank you. Does anybody have any? Yeah, sorry.
Thank you so
Does anybody have any questions? It would be good if you could use the raise hand button just so I can check who puts their hand up first. So, Tommaso, please.
Yes, hello to everyone.
Hello.
This just one question about the date of birth of Basile. Lorenza said that he born in 1583. Why this date? Because before Croce established in 1575, and recently, let's say about 10, 15 years ago, another date, the 1566, was now accepted or spread around that is the date of his birth. So there are three, maybe four dates. Which one is not the one, but which one we have to consider? We have to consider the 1566, he born in Giuliano, where he died, or like Croce 1575, Bond in Naples or Basilico, or now 1583, Bond in Naples. Thank you.
Oh, Lorenzo, sorry, you're on mute.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. This is a great question, and indeed one that has been the source for debate for decades. 1583. Only recently, in the Archiepiscopal Archive of Naples, it had the birth certificate of Giambattista Basile has been found.
Well.
So it was born in yes, in late 1853, and Adriana was 3 years younger than him. He had 9 siblings. So we found the birth certificate, the parish birth certificate, even the name of the those who baptized him, and yes, and obviously his parents, whose names are known.
Yeah, because there is, I'm sorry, there is also a birth certificate that found it in Giuliano.
That's right. That's right.
So, and this
Yes.
carta canta, so
Carta canta, yes, of course. The documents preserved and conserved at the Archiepiscopal Archive in Naples are also part of a filza that contains the birth certificate of his siblings, with reference to the place of residence, Naples, and even the house, the street name of where Basile and some of his siblings were born. So perhaps we may consider this as the ultimate historical evidence for establishing Basile's birth.
We will do a tea break in 1 minute, but we have one question in the chat from Annette, which says, did he gather stories from his local area or further afield?
Well, another great question. Thank you. Both. Locally, when we say locally, and we talk about Naples, we talk about a multicultural city, one of the largest cities in Europe and the largest Mediterranean ports. The city was also home to various communities coming from throughout the Mediterranean, as well as parts of Europe, like according to historical circumstances, of course. We had at some point a Dutch community and even an English community. So when we look at Naples, we look at multicultural microcosm. Basile also traveled extensively. He traveled along the Mediterranean route, along the Venetian Mediterranean route. He embarked on galleons. It was a very hard period in his life, and obviously stationed at various places. But he also spent a period of time on the island of Crete, which at the time was called Candia, which in itself was a multicultural community. And Basile was part of an academy. He lived on the island and obviously made contacts. And so his sources come from different geographical and cultural contexts.
Thanks, Lorenza. I'm going to stop recording there and say that it's tea break, but I can see that there is another question in the chat. So